This is happening so fast. I mean, the speed at which we are losing our constitutional republic is unbelievable. You know, when I started this channel, I didn't really expect that it would become a daily reflection on how we are losing our constitutional republic. But that's what's going on. I probably would have named the channel something else had I known that this is what I'd be discussing every day. But I want to talk specifically here about the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia and Donald Trump's defiance of the Supreme Court, refusing a 9-0 decision of the court, refusing to bring him back from El Salvador so that he can receive the due process that Donald Trump illegally denied him. Now, keep in mind what's going on here. You know, I worried when Donald Trump was reelected that he would chip away at the rule of law and at the Constitution so that people wouldn't understand what was happening. You know, the frog being slowly boiled sort of thing. You know, slowly turning up the heat of the water. And before the frog realizes it, he's already boiled to death and it's too late. That's what I worried about. But in fact, what's happening is the opposite. The strategy that they are employing is do everything so fast that he will have completely destroyed our constitutional republic before anyone even realizes what happened. It's the opposite of the frog in the boiling water thing. But it gets you to the same place. The complete and total destruction of our constitutional republic. And that's what's going on. Now, in order to become the dictator that he clearly intends to become, he needs to nullify the other two branches of government, Congress and the courts, most specifically the Supreme Court. He doesn't have to abolish them outright. If he can just get to a place where they mean nothing, they don't stop him, he can do whatever he wants, he blows past the checks and balances built into the system because he has completely nullified the other two branches of government, that's all he needs. He doesn't have to completely dissolve Congress and dissolve the Supreme Court. But he is effectively doing that. He's in the process of doing that. He's already conquered Congress. Congress is essentially nullified. They have refused to exercise their authority because they are afraid. They are scared to death to stand up to this man. Of course, you know, they're controlled in both houses by Republicans, although their House majority is the smallest majority in like a century. And part of the Republican caucus, both in the House and in the Senate, is in fact made up of true believing Trump cultists. No doubt. Some of these people are full on part of the cult. But most of them, even in the House, are not. They are simply giving in to fear. They're scared to death. You don't hear from most members of Congress. You hear from the cult members. The other ones are just keeping their mouth shut and their head down. They just want to survive. And part of survival in their calculation is not opposing anything, just going along. And to hopefully one day survive this period of time and still be in office. That's what they're doing. But whatever their motivation, Trump has essentially nullified them. They refuse to exercise their authority. So Congress has been conquered. Next up, the Supreme Court. He has to functionally destroy, nullify the Supreme Court. And that's what these illegal detentions, deportations, and essentially renditions are about. That's what the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia is all about. Now, a couple weeks ago, I posted a video in which I explained why Donald Trump was invoking the Alien Enemies Act. Because he doesn't need to. He doesn't need to invoke that act in order to deport people. If he wanted to deport Kilmar Abrego Garcia or any of the rest of them, he didn't need to invoke the Alien Enemies Act to do so. He invoked that act, which doesn't even apply. And by the way, the Supreme Court has not yet ruled on the merits of that case. I know some people think that, but they haven't. They just simply said, while the case is proceeding and before we decide this issue on the merits, whether Trump can legally invoke the Alien Enemies Act, we're going to allow him to keep using it until we ultimately decide on whether he can use it or not. Pathetic, but that's what they did. And ultimately, they might rubber stamp it anyway, but procedurally, that's where we are. But he never needed to invoke that act in order to detain and deport people. He invoked that act because he wanted to detain them and then deport them illegally without any due process. That's why he invoked that act. He wanted to do this all without hearings, without due process. And he, using the Alien Enemies Act, gave him the ability to do that, the rhetorical ability to do that, because actually the Alien Enemies Act still requires that these people be provided due process, which is also what the Supreme Court said in its decision from last week. While they gave him permission to continue using that act, they did say you have to provide these people with due process, even in invoking that act. Anyway, so that's the reason he invoked that act, is to send these people out of the country without any due process at all, knowing full well. And by the way, when I say that this is all part of the plan and I explain their strategy here, this is not Donald Trump's strategy. He's in support of it. He's going along with it. He didn't come up with this. He is far too stupid to come up with this. This strategy has been and other strategies they're employing have been devised by people who are not stupid. They may be evil, but they're not stupid. We're talking about the Stephen Miller types, the Russ Vought types, those kind of people. They're coming up with this strategy. And the strategy is deport people without any due process and get that case to the Supreme Court, one of those cases to the Supreme Court, because they can frame that issue in a way that is favorable to him. When he goes to the Supreme Court and gets an adverse ruling and then openly defies that ruling, he wants it to be on a case that he can spin favorably. And these deportation cases, when he defies the Supreme Court as he is doing, he can frame it as, well, I'm just trying to protect the American people from terrorists and drug dealers, and the Supreme Court is trying to stop me. That is the ground on which he wants to fight when he defies the Supreme Court. This is about picking your case. You don't want to defy the Supreme Court on, say, abolishing the Department of Education, because that's unpopular. The people are not on his side with that. And so if the Supreme Court ultimately rules that he has no authority to do it, that's not the best case to defy the Supreme Court on. And also, that case is going to take a long time to work its way up to the Supreme Court. These illegal detention and rendition cases are going to go to the Supreme Court quickly, as they have, because they have to do with an alleged illegal confinement of a person. You have to hear that kind of case quickly. You can't just let a person potentially sit in prison, or in this case, an El Salvadoran prison camp, for months and months or years while a case works its way up to the Supreme Court. That kind of case is going to make its way to the court quickly. So that's why they chose to push this kind of a case to the Supreme Court. One, they can frame the issue favorably to them, and they can get it to the court quickly. And the court has already ruled 9-0 that Donald Trump must bring him back, and they are defying that order. And yesterday, Trump and Bukele there in the Oval Office both said, oh, there's nothing we can do. We can't bring him back. Trump says, I can't bring him back. El Salvador is a sovereign nation. I can't tell them what to do. And Bukele says, well, I can't send him back. I have no authority to send a terrorist back into the United States. Of course, we all see the game that's being played there. Donald Trump doesn't want him brought back and tells Bukele, yeah, just say you can't do it. If Trump wanted him back, he'd be back. And this idea that we have that the Trump administration, that the United States, the administration and the courts have no jurisdiction here is laughable because it's a sovereign country. We're paying them $6 million a year, reportedly, to house these people. That means they're not technically in El Salvador's custody. They're in our custody. Right? We're paying them to keep them for us. It's no different than when the federal government contracts with a state to house federal inmates. They're still in federal custody, even though they're being held in a state or local jail or prison. Anyway, you get the point. So this idea that they can't bring them back is laughable. Now, the question here is, what will the court do? What will the court do now? And this next decision by the court is going to be a big one. Will they strongly denounce what Donald Trump has done or order him in strong, unambiguous terms to bring him back, to reject this bullshit, that there's nothing we can do, and order him back? Or will they cower and cave and give in to him? This is what Donald Trump has been angling for. This is what they want. And once the court buckles, if they give in to him, game over. Once Donald Trump openly defies, especially a united Supreme Court, as this court was on this case, 9-0. We'll see once the court deals with again, what the decision will be then. But once Donald Trump directly violates an order of the Supreme Court and says, no, you can't make me, then we'll see what happens. If nothing happens, then Donald Trump will have essentially nullified not only Congress, but the Supreme Court. And he will at that point know that he has the powers of a dictator. What should happen, obviously, is if the president defies an order of the Supreme Court, is that he should be impeached and removed from office. But for the reasons we already discussed here, that Congress has essentially been nullified, we know that won't happen. Not anytime soon. So once he openly defies the Supreme Court, as was the plan all along, he will have the powers of a dictator. The only way to stop this is to impeach and remove him from office. Now, I know that's not going to happen anytime soon, as we've discussed. In which case, we are going to lose this republic. Impeachment and removal is the mechanism in the Constitution for exactly this situation. When you have a president violating the Constitution like this, attempting to accumulate for himself the powers of a dictator, nullifying the other branches of government, blowing past the checks and balances, the remedy to that, provided by the Constitution, is impeachment and removal. It's not going to happen right now, and maybe it never will, and in which case this country is done. Because we won't survive even to the midterms, assuming we even have midterm elections. Look at how quickly. We're 3 months in, and he's already nullified Congress and on the verge of completely nullifying the Supreme Court. 3 months in. You think there's going to be anything left of this republic to save by the midterms, even if we have midterm elections? I sure as hell don't. Impeachment and removal is it. That's the only choice. It's either let Donald Trump become the dictator he wants to be and destroy utterly this constitutional republic, or impeach and remove him from office. Those are your two choices. To say that it's impossible, we cannot impeach him and remove him, you may be right, but that's also a decision. The choice has been made. The choice there then is to let him destroy the republic. Those are only options. And the only way that happens is if he becomes, members of Congress are made to be more afraid of the American people than they are of Donald Trump. Not through violence, not through anything illegal, but politically speaking. If they become more afraid of the American people than they are of Donald Trump, then impeachment and removal is possible. But I see no evidence of that happening anytime soon, maybe ever. But that's where we are. That's the choice before us, America. We lose it all or we get rid of this guy. And right now, looks like we're going to lose it all. Thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon.